Well, we have a different type of education for you today. I've spent a lot of time teaching and thinking about what is the best way to communicate the foundation and the basic principles of the market profile and trading. What has concerned me over the years is that when you present things in kind of a linear way, here's a definition, memorize this definition, et cetera, it doesn't make it real. And sometimes people get a false sense of what trading is about. Trading is not easy. And so we want to present this from a real life situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to replay August 23rd, 2018. It was a day that included many of the points that we like to make and talk about. So we're going to play this. We can play it at regular speed, which is exactly how the day is, or we can speed it up if there's areas that we want to move on to. All right. The first thing you do prior to the market opening is you look at the overnight trade, the electronic trade from overnight, and just a couple minutes before the opening, you can see where the last trade is overnight. So that's going to give you a pretty close idea or approximation of where we're going to open. So I'll tell you on the 23rd, we're going to open in the previous day's profile. When we open within the previous day's profile, that increases the odds that we will have a rotational trading day. Now, there's other considerations. If it opens exactly on one end or the other, that may change that a bit. But if it opens within, pretty well in the body of the profile, the odds are pretty good that we're going to have a rotational trading opportunity today. And the reason for this is the market is in balance. When we say a market is out of balance, we are meaning that the market is opening outside of the previous day's range. When we open inside the previous day's range, we say the market is in balance. So the 23rd is in balance. And we're now playing it at 2 times the speed. But we want to watch and go through this day. We'll speed it up, we'll slow it down from time to time, but set up a little more context as this day is opening. If you look at the high of 821, and the high of 821 is a poor high. A poor high means that there is no single prints on the top of the profile. When you have a poor high, that starts to put the odds in the favor of going back to that high. But remember, it's just a single data point. Data points are not always action points, but data points are important in determining what kind of odds may exist in the market. Remember, we talked about the need to think in terms of probabilities. Okay, so we've said that the high of 821 is poor because there's no excess or single prints. We now come over and we see the high of 822 is also poor. So we have 2 back-to-back poor highs. This greatly increases the odds. If, for example, we gave the high of the 21 of 821, say a minus 20, that that the market would come back to that level because it was weaker than it looked. Then we get 2 back-to-back highs. So if we signed a minus 20 to the 21st, the assignment to the 22nd wouldn't be minus 21. It may be minus 60 because you've got an exponential factor going on here. So you've greatly, with 2 back-to-back poor highs, you've greatly increased the odds that we're going back there. So trading is about context. It's one thing to teach terms and value areas and things like that, but understanding context is really far more important than anything else. The context we have here, two back-to-back poor highs. Additional context is we're opening within the previous day's range. All right, now we've come back up. If you look down near the bottom of the profile, you'll see a green dot. That green dot is the opening, and that becomes a day time frame reference. It's not relevant to any other time frame. The next reference is the green circled box. That is unchanged, and markets always use that as a reference. So you'll see the market has traded up to unchanged. It went a tick above it, and then it backed off a little bit. And so it's, there's nothing really exciting going on here. It's just trying to make up, it's the early day, trying to make up its mind of what the market wants to do. If you look a little higher, you'll see a green line starting with A and ending with N. That's the point of control from the 22nd. Now that is a prominent point of control. A prominent point of control is a point of control that's above average. Now, the easy thing is to say, well, Jim, what is average? I don't know what average is. You get this from experience from looking at the profiles every day. And it changes depending on, how stretched out the profile is, etc. But I can tell you that is a very prominent, or I'm sorry, not a very prominent, it's a prominent POC. The more prominent a POC is, the higher the odds that the market will go back and revisit it. Now, coming down between the opening and the POC, you'll see another line. That line is kind of a reddish line, and that is half back from yesterday. So if you look at half back from yesterday, that is also another reference, and it's a day time frame reference, probably not relevant to the following day, but it is relevant today because the market will focus on those things. The shorter the traders in the market, the more they will focus on these very obvious, what we call static references. A static reference is a reference that's not going to change. Yesterday's high is static. Yesterday's low is static. Unchanged from yesterday is static. The point of control is static. Now, where you get to the point where you get non-static references are today's POC, because that can change. All right, so now we've seen the market open within yesterday's range. So that's probably a trading environment, and the market is now trading higher. It's still within yesterday's value area, which is another reference. The value area is extremely important reference. If there's anything major going on today, you'll see either higher value overlapping to higher or lower value overlapping to lower. So right now we remain within the previous day's range. You remember that we've already talked about the two poor highs, back-to-back poor highs. That gives high odds that the market will go back and revisit those highs, and in a relatively quick order. Now, remember, each of those days, the market went up to the high and traded off. So again, just because you get to a high and the market stalls, that doesn't mean it's going higher that day, but it means the auction's not completed. When you go to an auction, if the auction has been run successfully, you should get excess. So if it goes up, for example, and it's a completed auction, it should drop away from it very quickly. When you get two uncompleted auctions back to back, that's a sign that the market just hasn't completed the current auction. So the market kind of went into a rest, or maybe it just got, too much inventory long. And sometimes when you get too much inventory that's long, which can happen because the market's been going higher, sometimes markets have to break before they rally. You've probably heard, if you've been around the market, you've heard that. Sometimes market has to break before it can rally, or rally before, or rally before it can break. So we get a lot of these sayings. In this case, if inventory is too long, that just means that short-term traders, in most cases, they've just overdone themselves and they're holding too much long inventory. When you hold too much long inventory, every time the market tries to go up, they get nervous and they sell, take some profits. And sometimes we just had to have the market break, get them out of the way, and then replace that with new money that can come in and go back after the completion of the auction. Okay, so now we're within yesterday's range. We back through unchanged. We're at the point of control. You can see that happens so often in there. There are references. If there's anything here, the market then finds acceptance or doesn't leave single prints above the point of control from yesterday. But you can see a lot of these points of control or a lot of these references, these data points, you can see that the markets hesitate around those levels. Now, one of the things that is important in trading is understanding who you are competing against. A lot of traders come in the market, they just follow price, they don't think about who is my competition. Imagine going in and playing tennis and not observing if you're playing a left-handed or right-handed tennis player. I mean, that's makes all the difference in the world. Where you hit the ball, what they're capable of doing, and the same thing here. Trading is a very competitive game. Everybody out there is wanting to take your money just as you'd like to take everybody else's money. And so the competition is fierce. So you have to understand what's the mindset of that competition. Now, when you see the competition trading mechanically around these references, you see kind of the market halt there. That is an indication that we are looking at short-term trading money. It's very important to know, am I competing against long-term serious money, that really is going to buy the market and hold? Or are we looking about a lot of traders that are very much like ourselves? When markets go to these mechanical references and they hang around at those references for a while, with a pretty good idea that we are competing against short-term traders or traders very similar to ourselves. If it was long-term or more serious type of money in the market, you don't spend a lot of time at those references. You go through them fairly quickly. You may see a small pause, but you see a much stronger determination and you'll see the market continue right through them. Now, it's early in a foundational course to teach those things. All we've done so far is introduce some nomenclature and how do how's the value area calculated? What's the point of control? What's the significance of the point of control? Well, it's just concepts we've introduced so far. Now, all of a sudden, early in the foundational course, we're talking about real markets and what goes on. And what we want to do is we want to be able to discuss these reference points or data points in real time. So you have a much better understanding of what trading is really about, and you don't get a false sense of trading. Trading is difficult, not impossible. All right, so now the market continues higher. Markets are also very visual. When I say markets are very visual, that means that they'll see an obvious reference and they start trading towards that reference. So right now, the visual reference is going to be the high from the 22nd. So you see what the market's doing. Now, I'm going to introduce another concept. Jen, if you can stop for just a second. I want to introduce another concept here. It's going to be a difficult concept. We have too many single prints from the bottom, at least in my opinion. What does that mean? When you have too many single prints, as you see right here, the market is very thin and there's no backing and filling. usually when you have this situation, you have traders that just are emotionally buying the market because these single prints are to the upside. They're so excited, everybody wants to get on board. So when I see these single prints, that's an indication to me that the market may be too enthusiastic about what it's doing. The traders may be overly excited about what's going on. Now, when I introduce a concept like this, you're going to say, well, Jim, what is too many? And I'm going to say, I don't know. I can't tell you what too many is. This is another thing that you learn as you watch the markets. And again, it's going to surround context. If we were breaking out into new high ground, and so it's a new leg of a market, this may not be too many single prints. But remember, today we're inside the previous day's range. So that tells us the market is still within balance. Within balance, it's a lot of single prints. So context is everything. When we take the foundational course, all we're trying to do is give you some kind of footing in order to be able to watch the markets and observe what's going on. And hopefully you'll get introduced to our intensive education courses. The intensive we do in real time. Each one is over 5 weeks. We usually do 2 of them back to back. And that's where you continually get a better sense of the importance of this information. You see it day after day in real time. So again, it takes a lot of time to put this information together, to make it real, and to be able to be a competitive trader. All right, now before we turn this back on live, where are we right now? We're at the previous day's high. Now, when you're at or just slightly below the previous day's high, there's a good chance that there are going to be traders that are going to automatically take profits there. And so, we get the inventory is pretty long. All the single prints tell us that. So it's not uncommon at this level that you get some movement to the downside, that the market moves up, goes to the downside. This lets some of that inventory that was buying the market this morning take their profits, step aside. And if we're going to take the high out, more than likely, as it backs off, that money that was selling gets replaced by newer, fresher short-term funds. Okay, it's high. If you're going up and you get near yesterday's high, and that's why we talk about the importance of looking at a previous day's high, talk about the importance of seeing 2 back-to-back poor highs. We said that's great odds that we're going to go back up there. Do I know exactly what those odds are? No, but you can sense, if you understand, you can sense what it is. Some people say, well, if you don't have exact odds, I'm not very trustworthy of that approach. And my comment has always been, when I'm driving on drive pavement or I'm driving on icy pavement, I certainly know that there's more danger driving on the icy pavement. I have more risk. I can't tell you exactly how much that risk is, but I know I have more risk just from experience. Now, and that can change too. Is it really cold ice? Is it kind of wet ice? Do I have good tires, bad tires? What kind of weight do I have in my car, etc. So that's, again, the context that can change, even though it's going to be more dangerous. But there's other contextual things that can also change that. All right, we're going to go back, play this drive. Remember, we're at the previous day's high, just below. It's a very obvious place to see some profit taking come in, or some people adjusting their inventory, being, hopefully, if it's going through, replaced by other traders. All right, so it's the high we're coming up to. We can play. The high we're coming up to is a poor high. Remember, because there are no single prints. Okay, so the market's right there at this point in time. And how much time do we have left in A period?
Less than 6 minutes.
Okay, so we've been 24 minutes. This market's been trading for 24 minutes this morning. It's gone to a very, you know, obvious point, and we didn't know when it first opened, but we did know that there was a good chance because the odds of going back up there were very, very high. Remember, they're only odds. That doesn't mean they have to happen. All right, so we said it's a good chance when you get up near this static reference that there may be some profit taking. It's just logical. People that have been long or traders that have been long in money, they say, okay, if they're smart traders, they know that if there's going to be a problem, it's going to be at that very visual reference. So it's a significant short-term reference. And we know we're there at this point in time. So you see the market backing off a little bit, very expected. Now, what happens sometimes to traders? They get overexcited and they're going to go short the market, or fade the move to the upside means go against. And they say, wow. But then if you look, we're so close to yesterday's high. The odds are still pretty good that the market's going back through that high. And you have to keep that in your thinking rather than just get excited, oh, I'm going to go short because, we're right up the high. It's a good place. It may be, but if you do that and you don't get satisfaction very quickly, you need to step aside. All right. So the market's backed off, not unexpected, happens almost all the time. So there's no real shock in here. Well, we're going to change times, very quickly. And A period, we'll look at A period. Now I know from looking at this day that the volume in A period was relatively low for the day. And that's just something I factor in. Remember, price advertises opportunity, time regulates all opportunities, and volume measures the success or failure of those advertised opportunities. Now, it's one data point. Volume's one data point. And what it may not be relevant today, but it may be more relevant as we stack these data points together, just like the two poor back-to-back highs. Each were separate data points, but when you stack them together, they start to change the odds. All right, so the market's backed off quite a bit in here. And what you have to be careful of, some traders can get their emotions and say, oh boy, I'm going short. And without realizing there's a good chance we're going higher. So, but if you go short, realizing that, then your short has to be rewarded very quickly. Okay, so now we've opened in B period. So the first 30 minutes is gone. I've already said that the volume was relatively low in there. We've already said that, at least I thought, there were too many single prints. It means it shows just maybe too much emotion taking the market higher. And again, you'll ask me how much too many single prints, and I'll tell you, I can't tell you that exactly, but I can tell you for the situation in here, because we're inside the previous day's range, it appears to be excessive. Now, what'll happen if you take the intensives and you see this over and over again, all of a sudden you start to internalize it and you get that intuitive feeling that there's too many in here. Now, a lot of people don't really understand intuition. Intuition can be honed. It can be sharpened. When you get experience, you still have intuitive reactions, but they're based on a much broader base of experience. When I started to use the term hone intuition, I wondered if I was going to get, attacked by any psychologists or things of that nature. So when I wrote the first book, Mind Over Markets, I had got a response. I got an over 40-page response back from Brett Steenbarger. Brett Steenbarger is a very well-known psychologist and trading coach. And so he had me up to his house in upstate New York, and we went up. I met his family, but we got to be, well acquainted with each other. And over the years, we've stayed in contact. And so I sent him an email when I was going to use the term honed intuition. I said, am I going to get attacked by this? He said, absolutely not. So, I forget exact words, but he came back with an email. He said it, absolutely not. A very legitimate concept and a very powerful concept. So what we're talking about, you see these single prints, you've seen a lot of them taken back so far. There's still a lot. And we've seen the market go up towards the previous day's poor high. We've seen how we've gone through references, through the unchanged level, through half back from yesterday, through the prominent point of control, and now back up towards the very visual high from the 22nd. So the market did back off. We still have a good high today, and it's a good high because there are single prints on the high. It is not a weak high because there is enough room between today's high and yesterday's high. A weak high occurs when there is, it's exactly at or only one tick above or below a previous reference. So far we have a good high because there's single prints, and it is not a weak high because, it's got room between today's high and the high from the 22nd. All right, so we backed off right at the end of A period. B period continues to get a little consolidation of, the enthusiasm early on. And now we watch to see once the market, kind of settles in, absorbs that early morning move to the upside, then we watch and see what is the next move. Notice just below the B period low is another line. It's white in the center of it. That's half back for today. Now, that is a dynamic reference because it will change. Just as the point of control can change today, so can half back. Half back is a common reference used by short-term traders. We didn't get there. The fact that the market didn't get to half back is an interesting concept. It seems minor, but it's not. When you learn how to look at a market, you start to understand those things. If we can shut it down for just a second, I'd appreciate it. I want to talk about another concept in here. It's a psychological term. It's called chunking. Now, you may say, oh, I don't want to hear this psychological mumble jumble. And, and sometimes people, they kind of close their minds, but don't. It's not that hard. If you think about the first time you backed your car out of the garage, think how slow that process was. You put the key and you adjusted the seat. You finally got the car started, and you look over your shoulder several times. You back up, a little bit, then stop and look and check. And, it's a very slow process. What happens? The more you back the car out of the garage, the more it becomes an internal, accepted movement to you. The more you do that, you've chunked that information. So you do it much faster, you do it much smoother, almost without thinking. When you get up out of bed and you walk down to have breakfast in the morning, walking down to have breakfast, that's chunking. If it wasn't for chunking or, these habits, we wouldn't be able to get through the day. Now, chunking, when we sometimes can take it too far. But what I'm talking about in the market, when the market opens, when you get well-versed and comfortable with the markets and you understand this idea of chunking, you want to see several things, almost instantaneous. Now, when I look at a market, I'll immediately see where the opening is. I'll immediately see within the previous day's range, immediately see that we're above unchanged from yesterday. I'll immediately see looks to me like too many single prints, and I'll see we've gone to a very visual level up near yesterday's high. And I've automatically, seen that we have two back-to-back poor highs. Okay, let's turn this back on and let's watch a little more as the market continues. Again, our focus is going to be on yesterday's high to begin with, because we said the It's a poor high, and it's two back-to-back poor highs. Today's high so far is good because there's single prints. Now the question as we watch is, will those single prints remain? We're into B period. The market's backed off. Traders have had a chance, to those that wanted to sell that got long this morning, they've had a chance to unload that inventory. It's been, those buyers have probably been replaced with somebody else, but we've also got other traders that weren't liquidating inventory, but they were going short automatically near yesterday's high because that's what they do. They just see that as a great opportunity. It's not something I do, but there are a lot of traders, that's what they'll do. So understand those traders that were selling at yesterday's high, their position is short. So they can be adding to the short inventory. And that can help the market go higher. When the market gets short, the way you replace a short is by buying. So if they push the market down by selling, they get too short, that inventory may have to be replaced. How do you replace, or how do you get out of a short position? Remember, you have to buy. Just if you have too many long positions, how do you get out of a long position? You sell. When you get out of a long position, we call it liquidation. When you have to get out of a short period position, we call it short covering. So short covering and long liquidation are just the same terms, opposite terms for the market condition. Short covering means you have to buy. Liquidation means you're selling, just what you would think it would mean. Okay, so B period continues. We're still haven't got back to the high. B period so far is an inside bar. An inside bar means that the B period bar is totally contained within the A period bar. When you get an inside bar, that is a form of balance. And markets are always looking for kind of a place to come into balance and see two-sided trade take place. Okay, so we're back again. You see the market one more time. It's kind of moving up and towards the high. We haven't gotten there again yet, but you can just see the market backed off, but you haven't seen any great cratering in the market. We said earlier on, probably too many single prints. Well, there's not as many anymore. I still think there's too many. It's just an observation. We'll see what happens as the day goes on. Okay, so B period is still an inside bar, still within yesterday's range. So now you've got a pretty good idea what's going on in here, or at least what the market is trying to do. Remember, markets are very visual. Everybody can see yesterday's high, and you can see how the market reacted. As we got to yesterday's high, you got the expected reaction, and the expected reaction was to see some profit taking and maybe even some shorts, because it's so visual, it's so obvious. It doesn't take a great deal of thought. Anybody can do that, and that's sometimes why it makes it very dangerous. Okay, so B period's coming back at this. Now we're going to watch this fairly closely as we get up here. We're playing at 2 times speed right now. So, we're not that far ahead of what the actual market's doing. A little later on, after we get, a little more idea what's going on, we'll speed this up so we can go through the rest of the day a little more quickly. But this is such an important level up here that I want you to see it play out. I want you to understand why some people took profit, because of very visual level, and why I'm sure there were other people that were shorting up there. Shorting means, you're not selling existing positions. You are shorting new positions, which the only way you can cover those is come back later and buy them. Okay, how much time is left in B period?
Less than 11 minutes.
Okay, so you can see we're 2/3 through B period, and the market still remains balanced. 2/3 through, about 10 minutes to go. So the market still hasn't made up its mind yet what it's going to do. So sometimes you just have to watch. One of the great benefits, or one of the things you learn by trading. People will tell you mechanically, oh, you have to have patience. Well, that's true. It's easy to say, but you have to understand what patience is. B period up here near this very visual level, having patience right here and letting the market play out is important. So I don't want patience just to be, oh yeah, you have to have patience. Anybody can tell you that about trading. But again, it has to be put into context before it has any real meaning to you. And usefulness. Usefulness is more important than anything else. But this would be an area when you're so close to yesterday's high, it requires patience to see what happens in here. All right, so the market is, B period, coming back up towards that high. Not unexpected from what we talked about earlier. Doesn't have to happen, but it wasn't anything that was really unexpected. All right, so we now have a weak high today. I'm sorry, a poor high because there are no single prints. So it's a poor high at this point. So let's stop for just a second. Right now, we have three poor highs. We have today's high, which is poor because there's no excess. We have yesterday's high, which is poor because there's no excess. And we have the high from the 21st, which is poor because there are no excess. The odds at this point are huge that we will come back up and take out at least yesterday's high. Now, at this point in time, when this market backs off, when I see the three back-to-back poor high, the market backs off. I use this to get a little bit longer in the market. Now, there's many ways to get longer. You can do it by buying futures. You can get longer by using options. Now, I'm not going to talk any more about options here, but if you take the intensive course, we will talk in some depth about options. We have, I think it's 4 or 5 separate sessions just on options. I use the options quite differently than anybody else does. And that will be a subject that you get involved in the intensives that we will expose you to. All right, let's go ahead and play. We have 3 poor highs. The chances of taking it are very good. So we'll just watch and see what happens here. Okay, see a little bit of volume building. A very important level. This is when you get days like this and references like this, I tell people, don't go out for coffee today. Pay attention. Don't be emailing jokes. Don't be doing other things. Stay in tune with the market. These are very important decision levels up here. Once again, poor high means there's no excess, no single prints. It takes 2 single prints to qualify as excess. A weak high or low is because the market is within 1 tick, either above, below, or exactly at a visual reference. And we're not there yet, but we'll watch and see what happens in this today as this market goes on. Okay, how much time left in B period?
Less than 5 minutes.
Okay, so you can see we're getting near the end of the second period or near the end of an hour of the trade. And we're right back up at the high. So we had the inside bar. An inside bar is a form of balance. And a lot of times, one of the most powerful concepts we deal with is balance. The two are excess and balance. When markets leave excess, it's usually the start of a new auction. When they come out of balance, that's also usually the sign of at least a new leg. But our rules are you look above, let's say you look above balance and fail. If you look above balance and fail on one end, the destination trade then becomes the opposite extreme. Destination trade is just a term I use to say That's, if all was right, that's where the market would go. Does it have to go there? No. But that's, you have something to judge by. Just as I would say, as the market started up today, that yesterday's high was a destination trade. That's okay. Now, we now have a weak high because we're within one tick, still weak because we're exactly at yesterday's high. So it's a weak high now. Right now there's a couple single prints, so it's a good high because there's single prints, but it's a weak high because it's exactly at yesterday's high. Still a pretty good chance that we're going to take that out. Then the question becomes, once it takes it out, do you get upside follow through, or does the market fail and come back into yesterday's range? You're up here now. They should get this out with, there we are, we've taken it out. Now there will be a lot of trading back and forth. Some traders trying to go short, some traders buying because thinking they've got an upside breakout. So you've got to watch very carefully to see what's here. Now remember, I said early on that the volume from yesterday, I'm sorry, for the volume for the first period this morning was very low. When you have low volume like that, that decreases the odds that you will get much meaningful carry through to the upside. Now, as a trader, I'm watching this area very closely. Okay, now we have a poor high again because there's no single prints. The market pulled back to one tick above yesterday's high, a very common reference. Again, it's very visual. So the market is very common. Now you're watching very closely to see what happens in here. Now this is what I call a go, no-go level. A go, no-go level is an area that the market either goes one way or fails and goes the other way. Does it have to happen? Absolutely not. But it's just a term, it's my own term that I've come up with. And incidentally, a lot of the terms that you hear in this course are terms that I've come up with over 40 years of trading, but they're not terms that you hear in other training courses. A lot of these are unique to us. And if they're used in other courses, it's probably because they've been associated with something that we're doing. So we have a lot of concepts that I picked up over 40 years. And what I try and do with these is realize how difficult trading is. And I know all the mistakes I've made over the years. When you become a trader, you are competing against traders that have been around for a long time. They've seen a lot of people fall by the wayside. If you're going to compete with them, you need some special knowledge pretty quickly. So let's just watch it. We now have a good high, but now we're back exactly to yesterday's high. A pullback. The pullback now is exactly to yesterday's high. That is a poor reference. It's a weak reference because it's exactly at a level. So let's just watch here for a second. Okay, we've looked above yesterday's high. We've come back into yesterday's range. This is truly a go, no-go level. Remember, the way I look at it, I thought the odds were relatively low that we would, continue much above this. The reason being the volume in the first half hour was low. Secondly, I still think there's too many single prints for a market that spends most of its time within the previous day's range. So right now, we don't know what's going to happen, but again, it's a very important level, and you should be glued to your seat at this level. You got to be careful you don't get too anxious. Too many times traders get too anxious and then they get long, they get short, they get long, they get short, and by the time they're done, they've lost money. Maybe the losses aren't great, but it's a combination of financial loss as well as emotional loss. Emotional capital is every bit as important as financial capital. You need both in order to be a survivor as a trader. So this is a very important level. We're seeing the market trading back and forth. It hasn't made a decision yet. The pullback low in C period is now one tick in yesterday's range. That is not a particularly strong reference because it is exactly one tick, below. It's a very visual, very mechanical level. So I don't think it's a particularly strong level. But we'll just continue to watch. If the market gets back in and finds, a little more time within yesterday's range, then we start looking to see what it does on the downside. Can we get carry forward or carry forward going down? Right now, we don't know. We do know that the market is spending quite a bit of time at the previous day's high. We do now have a good high. It's a good high because we have single prints. Yesterday's high became support. When you take out a static reference, that reference then becomes support. It's not huge support, but it is, it's just one way to be able to focus on what's going on. So the market is coming back into yesterday's range. It's just kind of poking at that support level. When I see that happen, I consider it like a permeable membrane. Every time you hit a permeable membrane or poke at it, it becomes weaker and weaker. So the more it pokes at yesterday's high, the greater the odds that the market can trade back down through that. We're back in even more now. The downside reference would be half back. You'll see B period is now right at half back. The B period low right at half back. That would be if the market fails at the high here. In other words, it looked above, failed, and came back in. The first downside destination trade would be half back. Now, as we're watching this, let's talk about value for a while. In the first few lessons, we focused a lot on value. Remember, value is where 70% of a day's trade takes place. The point of control is very important in determining value, because we start at the point of control and then we just extrapolate up and down until we have 70%. We look at value today and we see value as of right now is building, overlapping to higher relative to yesterday. As the day goes on, we really want to see what happens with value. Remember, we trade value, not price. Value is simply a pricing advertising mechanism. Value is far more important because it weeds out a lot of superfluous things that are going on around the market. So the strong market, we would continue to see value overlapping to higher and get some further acceptance on the upside. If the market starts to get overlapping value to yesterday, well, then we say, wait a minute, there was no real carry forward to the market we saw this morning. But notice around yesterday's high, it does not give up easily. Market is back and forth between yesterday's high. You can see it looked above it. It came back into yesterday's range. It looked below it. Tremendous amount of uncertainty in this level.
And just to review for everybody, when Jim's talking about overlapping value, the way it's depicted here on Window Trader Blue is the blue shaded area is the value area. So you can see this is 822's value area, and then 823's developing value area right now is, as you can see, overlapping to higher, the blue shaded area.
Thank you. And this is calculated. Most of the vendors that provide market profile will have a way to calculate this value area as it goes. Let me take this time to point out, we are not profile traders. We are discretionary traders, which means, we're not looking for a systematic approach, a mathematic approach. We use the profile to organize the market's continuous two-way auction process. So let's stop for a second and let me talk about the auction process. The auction process is behind everything we do. The market this morning opened and we auctioned a little bit higher, we auctioned a little bit lower. Finally, the market started to auction higher. And it was a pretty determined higher. Talked about the single prints, and I thought maybe the auction got too aggressive on the upside. So it's too many single prints. Here again, I can say, I can't tell you exactly what that is, but that's what it looked like to me. And the context is everything in the auction because all those single prints occurred within yesterday's range. So the market was in balance. Now, when a market or an auction looks outside of balance and comes back in, then you can see the auction was going higher. Then the auction did some rotation. So you can have auctions within auctions. So the primary auction today was to the upside. Then as we got near yesterday's high, you had a series of short-term auctions to the upside, a series of short-term auctions to the downside, and that reflects, the confusing views that people had. The purpose of the auction is to fairly distribute the bids and offers that are coming in from all over the world. The auction process is extremely old. You see it back in biblical times. It's just how, it's a fair way to determine what is the fair, what is the fair price. And remember what we've said, there's another way to think about the point of control. The point of control is also the fairest price at which business is being conducted. That is an extremely important concept, and it's extremely important to be able to think of the market that way. Okay, so right now, from the auction process, we auctioned higher. As we got near yesterday's high, we had several auctions that went higher, lower, higher, lower. That was the market trying to absorb all that activity. And then we saw a determination that they took the market higher. The auction failed at that point again, and we started auctioning to the downside. So right now, we've had all those short-term auctions around, yesterday's high. Now, it looks like we have an auction that has a little more determination to the downside. Notice we said that yesterday's high becomes support. If we fail at that support, now this sounds strange, but if we fail at yesterday's high, the destination trade becomes yesterday's low. By destination trade, I don't mean we have to get there. I simply mean that is the potential that the market has. You look at one top of one day, you fail, the market or the auction goes down and looks and see what's at the opposite end. Doesn't happen that way all the time, but you're saying, okay, that is the potential destination trade. Then you're monitoring to see what are the odds that the market can get down to that level. One of the things we talk about continuously, and this is a new concept being introduced, is monitoring for continuation. So if you were long this morning, monitoring for continuation, you're watching to see, can the market get up to yesterday's high? Once we get up to yesterday's high, you remember we back off a little bit and you're monitoring to see, can we come back and take out that high? The market did that. So now that the markets looked above yesterday's high and failed, the destination trade becomes yesterday's low or the low of the 23rd. So it's doesn't mean it's going to get there, but that's the potential. Now we're monitoring to see, can the market go down that far? So if the market can get back there, you already left single prints on the top. We talked earlier about half back being a reference. So if you're going to get to the low, you would see the market go down to half back, and then you'd see the market get acceptance below half back. Gets acceptance below half back, that increases the odds that we can get down to the low. We don't know what's going to happen at this point, but that's why it's so important to monitor for continuation. Another thing in monitoring for continuation, we need to see the market spend more time down in the lower end of today's profile in order to bring pull value lower. Right now, value's overlapping to higher, but we need to see that value pulled down to at least unchanged if the market can go back down. Okay, let's turn it back on. Remember, we're focusing on half back, and we're playing. Let's speed up the speed we're playing this at right now. Let's take it up to about 6 times. So this will be a little faster, but there's some areas we need to get through this and see what happens, so we can spend some time on the lower end if it gets there. Okay, so you can see that we came back into B period. We're still there. The market is testing to the downside. If it gets there, it takes out the half back, it takes out the B period low. Taking out the B period low would be an indication that it's kind of a guarantee that the failure is meaningful on the high. Okay, so you see we're still, working our way down there. Get inside, think about getting inside the head of the people you're competing against. People saw the market go up this morning, they bought it, they got rewarded. So when the markets pull back like this, a lot of times they're thinking of buying it again. They're buying the pullbacks. You're looking at it and you should be saying, okay, well, we might, but we have single prints above yesterday's high. And now you're sitting there saying, well, wait a minute. We have to stay up there. Okay, now we're not. We're a single tick above half back. Remember, half back is a very visual reference. It is a reference that is used by short-term traders mostly. Longer-term traders probably don't even know where half back is. It's not something they would think about. But short-term traders very well know where half back is. Okay, so you can see we're back down there, 1 tick above half back. Okay, we've gone through half back by a tick. So we don't know what we're dealing with yet. Now we're through half back. This is a very difficult area. Now, if I'm short from the high, when the market pulls back to half back, as a trader, one of the logical places to do, short-term trader, is take off all of your position, or at least take off half of your position, because again, you're in one of those high risk areas. Okay, now we're seeing a little bit more acceptance below half back. We are no longer one time framing higher. One time framing means that B period did not take out the A period low, did take out the A period high, and C period took out the B period high. But now C period has taken out the C period low. So we are not trending higher. We moved higher today. If it was a trend day, it's unlikely that we would come back this early in the day and take out the low for the prior period. Is that absolute rule? No, it's an observation that I have in the market. So if you were looking for a trend day today and the market goes up, then your focus is on the high from yesterday, or at least the 21st here. Did the market find acceptance or rejection at that high? It found rejection at that high. That, as a trader, that is a place that you want to take action. That's your short position. Okay, so we're getting more and more acceptance below the B period low. We said early on the destination trade would be yesterday's low, or the low from the 21st. Does it have to get there? No, but it's one of those things that we are monitoring.
Just a correction there. The low of the 22nd, not the 21st. This low is what you were talking about, right?
I'm talking about the low from the 22nd. Yes.
Yes.
Well, the first thing in monitoring for continuation would be to go back below half back from this morning, morning of the 23rd. Then to get back down below the opening, the green dot, and then get down below the low from the early morning trade. So this auction, looking at the two-way continuous auction, the auction lost higher, it failed at the high, now the auction is auctioning lower. It's a continuous two-way auction process, and it is a great concept to keep in mind. Now, throughout this auction, we also want to look at value. Early on, we said value was building, overlapping to higher. So we're watching, what would it take? Let's stop for a second. One of the things that we've already covered is what would it take to change value? We said in the first couple of lessons that successful trading is creative problem solving. Creative problem solving also requires that you have an imagination. So when you're looking at this, you have to kind of have an imagination. What could happen? One of the things you're going to ask yourself, what would it take to drag yesterday or today's value down to at least overlapping to yesterday? You can get range extension on the downside combined with time. So the longer we trade on the downside, the more time we spend down here, the more acceptance we get, and the more likely that value will be pulled lower. Always have to be focusing on value. If we stop down here and value stays higher, then there's pretty good odds that we get a late rally. So value, focusing on value is very important in monitoring for continuation. So if you were short, monitor for continuation. We left single prints at the top. We got through half back. We're now down near the opening from today. All right, let's go ahead. Okay, we're at the opening. So the pullback low in D period is weak now because it's I think a single tick above unchanged. That's weak. Okay. Now we have the low is no good today. It's now a poor low because there's no single prints. Remember, the longer trades down here, the greater the odds that we'll pull value lower. All right. Now you're seeing range extension to the downside. Pretty drastic range extension to the downside. And importantly, we are below the low from the 22nd. If there is anything on the downside, we will find acceptance, meaning we will spend time down below yesterday's low, and it's unlikely that we'll come back in to yesterday's low into yesterday's range very much. Now, we look below yesterday's low, we've come back in, and we're spending a little time in here. So, it's right now, it's very uncertain. Let's stop for just a second. Another important concept that we deal with as traders, and we haven't talked about it yet, but it is conviction. How much conviction do traders have on any particular day? If you remember this morning, when we opened, we were back and forth through the opening several times. We then got up to unchanged, and we didn't point it out at the time, but the market was one tick short of unchanged. It backed off. It went up to one tick above unchanged, backed off again. When that happens, it's not a particularly strong day. We saw some hesitation around the opening. We saw some hesitation at unchanged from the previous day. Now, this can get confusing because you say, well, Joe, the market went higher. It did go higher, but I'm now, as I learn to watch a market, my focus is on how much overall conviction was there. If the market were really strong and there was really high conviction and you had serious money in the market, we probably would have gone a lot faster from the opening. We probably would have moved more quickly and with more conviction on the upside. We probably would have gone right through unchanged. We wouldn't have gone back and forth through unchanged. And so that tells me, that I'm keeping an eye on it. The conviction wasn't that high early on. Now we then saw a lot of single prints. And I said, well, that's a lot of conviction, Jim. And I'll say, well, you know what? It's too much conviction. I mean, it's a different kind. That's not markets that have conviction. That's not how they trade. And the reason for that is they have conviction. It's probably more serious money that's involved. And more serious money does not come in to really move a market. Serious money comes in, and what they'd like to do, in this case, they'd like to be able to buy, let the market settle back, buy some more, let the market settle back. And I don't talk about this theoretically. I ran an institutional trading desk when I was at PaineWebber, which was then became part of UBS Financial Services, a very large firm. And so firsthand, I got a view of how larger money trades in the market. They're not out to stretch a market or butcher a market like it happened, like you saw with all the single prints early this morning. When I see that, that is more an indication to me that I'm looking at short-term traders that maybe even have to cover shorts, or they're just emotional and going after it that way, not really doing thinking, just buying. So those are considerations. Now, if the market really has, got consideration on the downside, we'll trade below yesterday's low. Maybe we come back into yesterday's range once. But if you're back and forth, in and out of yesterday's range, more than likely your conviction on the downside isn't very great. Okay, let's go ahead and play. So we've already seen the market look below yesterday's low. We've seen it come back in. Now, while we're trading down here, we're spending time down here, right? Take a look at value. Value, the lower end of value, almost matches the lower end of yesterday's value. So a value area is now being pulled lower, and being pulled lower as a result of spending more time down on the lower end, more time and more range extension on the lower end. All right, so now we're back, we've come back up. Look at the single prints in D period. We've come back up quite a ways. Now you can see the market. Market doesn't really know what to do. There's a lot of choppiness in here. So it's consistent with, we thought there was lack of conviction early on. Then the market made a decision and the auction went higher. The auction failed. Now it goes lower. And now we watch what happens at yesterday's low. Remember, yesterday's low is a static reference, as was yesterday's high. Dynamic references now are point of control, half back. Do we have new excess today? Right now, we have a good auction in D period because we have single prints. So they're not making this easy at all. At this point in time, with the lack of conviction I saw today, if I were short, I would cover down here. Now, the truth of the matter was I was short. I took part of the position off when the market came to half back. It's just, sometimes you have to manage your trade as well as manage your finances. There wasn't a lot of conviction. Did I think the potential to go to the downside was there? Yes. Was I going to place all my money on that? No. Okay, so now the market is once again in and out and below yesterday's low. So we've seen that lack of conviction in the auction, but the auction is now trading lower again, and we now have a poor low again. Why do we have a poor low? Because there's no single prints. Notice as we change periods, once again, see what happened to value. The lower end of the value area is now below the lower end of the value area from the 22nd. So now it's showing a little more seriousness on the downside. But remember, we look below it and we've come back into yesterday's range and we're back in again. So we're not seeing that conviction. Okay, Jen, if you will, open this up full speed. There's a couple things I want to show later on here. So now, now we're playing this out, at pretty fast speed because I want to get to the later portion of the day and kind of show you some important things that come up at the end of the day. And incidentally, while we're doing this, we did not cherry pick this day. It was a day, it occurred while we were constructing the foundational course. This idea of tell me a story came into my mind, and I kept thinking, what a way to conduct education. The market does tell a story. There's a story in the continuous auction process. There's a story at all the reference points. Even concept has context has a story. So and the more context that's involved, the more intriguing and the more mysterious that story is. So this is a pretty good story. So now we've got value, the lower end of value, at least below yesterday. So we'll call this overlapping value. So we went from higher value to overlapping value, and the day is proceeding in time. But notice what I said early on, when you look below yesterday's range and came back in, can do it one time, it does more than that, then the odds aren't real good that you're going to get a lot more on the downside. The traders will still trade that way because they saw the market fail at the high. So some of those traders that were long at the high this morning and got out or didn't get out, or some of those that shorted up there, now the market goes down, and some traders have it right, but some are getting whipsawed in here. They're going long and short. You have to be able to keep a perspective on what the market is actually doing. So let's just watch a little more of this play out. What speed are we running, Jen?
40 times speed.
Okay, so you can see it's just happening pretty quickly. Okay, what is the green line? The point of control, right? So the point of control has moved lower. Now, markets are always looking for a place where two-sided trade can take place. At the high this morning, it didn't find a level where two-sided trade can take place. The market looked above the high from the 22nd, confused. It was confused for a while as it went back and forth, but it left single prints, and now the market's moved sharply to the downside, taking out the low from the 22nd. So that destination trade was completed. So now the market, as you can see, the rotation is going lower, higher, lower. So two-sided trade is taking place. When two-sided trade is taking place, the market is coming into short-term balance. In short-term balance, you're likely to get a lot of back and forth action. You'll see trade higher, you'll see it trade lower. A lot of traders get chopped up in these markets when you get down to this lower end. They've gotten themselves probably too negative or too positive, and neither one is appropriate. The market is conducting two-sided trade down here. So now, remember, that's what markets are, any market, no matter what the market is, whether you have a flower shop, a restaurant, trading, market's always looking for a level where two-sided trade can take place. Without two-sided trade, there's no business. You may have the best restaurant in the world, but if you don't have customers, you don't have two-sided trade, and it's not a profitable endeavor. So it's an important concept. Trading is a business. You're worried about inventory, you're worried about profits. So it's a business like any other business, and you have to run it like a business. All right, so we're getting late in the day. We're continuing two-sided trade. Now, there's another concept I want you to watch very closely in here. This is what traders do. They're looking for mechanical levels. Look at the H period low, the I period low, the J period low, the K period low. You see a little trend up there, a little short-term trend, and these traders are buying, fairly close to the previous low. It's a very mechanical way to trade. Now L period comes along. So we now have H, I, J, K, all part of this little trend to the upside. You can see you could draw a trend line there. I watch things like that very quickly. Now, depends on how you trade. If you're a very short-term trader, or what I call a fast trader, then you can trade a market like this, knowing that this is what the short-term traders are doing, as long as you understand what is going on. Because it's been there, it's 1, 2, 2.5 hours so far. There are some trades there. Now, they're not trades I will do, because I say, if they come back down through that, they can hit those stops, and it's what I call a firecracker effect, and take all those stops out. You can see what happened? You see they had that little trend line, how mechanically traders were trading them? They came back down through it, and they're triggering those stops one at a time. And that's what I call a firecracker effect. Let's stop for just a second. That's a very important concept. Now, it's not easy. When you see the market trading, and remember, it's one thing to watch it now, where you don't have money involved, you don't have your ego involved for making a decision. But there was a lot of trading going on in that area. We said it was, looking for two-sided trade. We're getting two-sided trade. Then we got it's really HIJKL. We got the market. We got this little short-term trend up there for, about 2.5 hours. And traders, short-term traders, they're buying the breaks. And that's pretty good. When I look at that, I said, does it always happen? Absolutely not. But I see the potential for a firecracker effect. What is a firecracker effect? That's when it comes down and it takes out the stop from the stops below 1 30-minute bar. They trigger the stops below the next 30-minute bar, etc. And you can see it went all the way down, finally taking out the low. Now, I probably shouldn't introduce that firecracker effect to you as, just starting your foundational course, because then you'll get too excited and look for, firecracker effects all over the place. But it was there. And since it was there, I wanted to introduce it. And you actually saw it happen. Now, another concept in here, not another, but going back, where is the point of control? Remember, the point of control has gotten fairly wide. The wider the point of control, and remember, what's the other term for point of control? What's the term I would rather have you use? The fairest price at which business is being conducted. So as this market continues to trade back down below the point of control, traders are getting short at prices below the fairest price. It's very difficult to hold these lows when you get this market. These are getting called getting short in the hole. Getting short in the hole means getting short at bad prices. Getting short at bad prices does two things. Once you understand what's going on. If you are short, it increases your risk considerably, because the odds are building up that you will get a short covering rally. If you are long down there, then it may be a fairly good short-term trade to the upside, because you see, well, it's a real trading move. You say the market's getting too short, or traders are selling in the hole, or traders are going short below the fairest price of the day. That fairest price of the day concept is extremely important. Value area is extremely important. What's happened to our value area now? It's overlapping to lower. See how that's changed throughout the day? We talked about successful trading involves imagination and creativity. Some traders so focused on price They couldn't think about point of control. They couldn't think about the value area. They're just mesmerized by price going back and forth. And almost every trader I've ever known, including myself, fights against getting trapped by price. The only reason we have a chance is because we're learning about value. But even knowing that, it's so easy to slip into price and get mesmerized by it. Very, very easy. But now you see that, so the market's gone down. When you see this, what I call this is a B formation. See, this is the stem of the B. The stem of the B is on top, and then you get the loop down here. When I see a B formation, to me, that is an indication that I'm seeing liquidation. Liquidation in place of something that could be more potent, a more potent sign would be the market elongating out. If the market elongates out, we're probably getting, liquidation and new money selling coming in. That is a much more powerful concept on the downside. When we see the B formation or we see the point of control remain higher every time this market sells off, remember, what's the other word for point of control? It is the fairest price at which business is being conducted. Now, one of the things that will happen when you get out and trade, and you'll have people talk about, oh, do you use the TPO point of control, which is reading the point of control, reading from left to right on the profile, or do you use the volume point of control? And the volume point of control is where the greatest amount of volume took place. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes there's a significant difference. And then all the focus gets on the point of control. Oh, we're using this. Don't fight about it. But what you really want to see, you want to see, as this market goes lower, are you getting value pulled lower? Are you getting elongation on the market? Elongation means that the profile gets elongated. This morning, remember I talked about, I thought there were too many single prints? And I can't tell you exactly what too many is, but it looked to me like the market was getting too elongated on the upside, particularly for having started out trading within the previous day's range, which meant the market started out within balance. Now what's happened? The market started out within balance. It looked above yesterday's range, above that static reference, which is yesterday's high, and it failed. Now you came back in, so the market is back into balance. You failed at one end. The possibility or the destination trade is the opposite end. Doesn't happen that often. This is a very unusual day, but it's a great teaching day. Now we did get to the lower end of yesterday's range, or the range from the 21st, but now we're not getting downside continuation. Look at the lack of elongation and the B formation. All right, we're in the last period of the day. Let's go ahead and play it out. We now have what kind of a low? We have a poor low. Why is it a poor low? Because there's no single prints. Now, a lot of them say, okay, well, that's pretty good odds that we'll come back down through that. There's another way that you get poor lows. If markets get too short, a market that gets too short can also have poor lows because traders are overly anxious to cover their shorts. They realize they may be in trouble, so they use that time to cover that short. All right, now as we end this day, it was a tremendous teaching day. You saw the market's continuous two-way auction process. You saw a very thin elongation as the market went higher. You saw some back and forth auctions, auction higher, auction lower, auction higher, auction lower, as we got up near the previous day's high, or that static reference. Very common. In fact, it's going to happen more of the time. Markets are going to get up there and they'll test around that area before they really make a decision. And then we saw the auction went above it. Then the auction started to kind of seriously move to the downside. As it goes to the downside, we're questioning, okay, what's going to happen to value? And can we get continuation? So we got liquidation, which, remember, liquidation is an indication of what we call old business. meaning that people that already held positions are selling the positions that they already held. That's called old business. When there's new money coming in, I call that new business. It's another great concept to keep in mind. So you're always asking yourself what's really going on in this market. Then we looked below yesterday's low and came back in several times. Now we've got this point of control. So now you've got continuous two-way auction going on in here. And what that, it's not telling you a lot other than when you get a continuous two-way auction like this, it's another form of the market coming into balance. So this market's coming into balance. We have a very prominent point of control, and we saw how that kept the market from getting too short. Okay, we're not going to go any further about what happens on the following day, but this was just a good example. We covered a lot of terms that were covered early on. We've added new concepts, but like I said, I'm excited about doing this foundational course because I think this gives you a much better chance to have an understanding of what really happens in the market. We can go on and teach the linear method as we started off. Here, here's what value is, how it's calculated. Here's the definition of these references. But that can give you a very false sense of security. I feel good about this course because it's different than anybody else does. And it lets you see these references in markets that are live. And you get a better understanding of how important they are. We talked a little bit about chunking. Chunking is it's a very important concept. It means you want to be able to see the references. You want to be able to see the point of control. You want to be able to see value moving lower, or at least overlapping the low. You want to see the single prints on the high. You want to see the lack of single prints on the low. You want to come in, if you were coming into a market totally fresh, you want to be able to look at that market and within seconds, you know exactly what's there. Look at this market. Where's the point of control? Building the skill that you can watch a market and understand what's going on, comprehend the continuous two-way auction process. At this point in time, probably people watching this video are getting very overwhelmed because there's a lot of information and we threw a tremendous amount of new information at you, as well as going back and reviewing old information. The advantage you have is you can go back and replay this and stop and start at any time. But your advantage is, yes, we gave you a lot of information today. Yes, it's market overload, it's information overload, but you have the ability to go back over this multiple times. I will promise you that this is probably as strong an educational course and foundation as you'll ever see.